Hello, everyone. A warm welcome to all of you. This is the Existentialist. I'm OJ. The topics we cover on this channel are existential inquiry, mental health, and self-realization. In this series, In Conversation With, I speak to experts in various fields and talk about their personal journeys and their expertise on subjects and topics that really matter. I'm so glad to have Ayatakshee again. If you haven't watched the first part of this conversation, please do check it out now. I'm going to provide the link in the description below. But this is going to be a follow-up about workplace violence. And today we're going to focus on the antidote to workplace violence. I hope a lot of you are looking forward to some practical solutions that we can implement. So I'm looking forward to this. I'm going to be learning with you all. And once again, really glad to have you, Ayatakshee.
Thank you, Ojas. And it was too generous of you to call me an expert. However, I would like to say that I'm still not an expert and I'm still learning. As you said, that we all are learning in this space. And I am also learning by co creating my experiences with my fellow employees' experiences. And whatever I'm going to share today in this platform is based on the co-creation of the experiences.
Wonderful. I'm really looking forward to it. And I know that there is a lot of personal aspect to this as well, which makes it so real. So thank you. So let's jump in. What is the antidote to workplace violence? In the video, discussing about forms it takes, right from bullying to sexual misconduct to having arguments or speaking behind the back. There are so many different forms, and it can escalate. So, what is the antidote to it?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. To answer this question, Ojas, I would like to take you to some of the historical events or historical incidents that were in the past, where non-violence. I mean, if you ask me what is the antidote, the only one answer I have is the non-violence is the antidote of workplace violence. But to elaborate that, I would like to take you to the historical events that were there back in 500 BC, where the potency of non-violence was already proved. To me, it is very it is very surprising that people in the modern era, especially in the contemporary times, people do not acknowledge the potency of nonviolence. Probably because of the negativity bias that is there, and people feel that violence can be countered only with violence. That's how it is embedded in their subconscious mind. But the antidote to it is nonviolence. And the recent example that I would like to give you is an example of the Berlin War in 1943. I mean, although it is not very recent, but it happened in the era of Hitler's regime, when the
Right.
women protesters and these women are the wives of the Jewish man. So when the men were taken for the deportation purposes, when they were taken away, and these women have actually protested for their husbands or their brothers, and that was a very successful protest, non-violent protest in the era of Hitler's regime, and Hitler, who was so-called the tyrant of the history.
Right.
Also, the other we already have in India, we have the Salt March. We in the industry context, we have the Ahmedabad textile industry strike, which was spearheaded by Gandhi. And also we have many instances which we fail to see in our through our eyes, because our mind is so conditioned to think that violence can only be countered with hatred, only be countered with violence. So also, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going back and forth, but the recent example is the singing revolution also by the farmers in the Karnataka. I don't exactly remember the date, but it happened exactly in this year. And these protests were very, it has its own efficacy, how it transformed the minds of the perpetrators who were actually kind of harassing them or bullying them in that sense.
So it
So,
was a non-violent protest?
yes, of course, it was a non-violent protest.
Okay, and it worked.
Yes, it worked. The so-called the perpetrators, the people who were trying to control the farmers' production, they were they reached to a point where they understood the farmers sufferings, and they also came to a mutual understanding where they could give away what they were holding for so long.
Well, I'm personally very glad to hear this. Being from India, we have a legacy of non-violence as being our trademark, right, from the time of Gandhi. But to know that it's still applicable, uh, and it still works even today is
Mhm.
amazing to hear. So how do you apply that to the workplace, and how can you use non-violence to transform the workplace?
Mhm. So there are many methods by which there are many non-violent methods by which you can transform a workplace. So I would like to give you an example where a women employee who was the subordinate to her capacity of in the power hierarchy, she was the subordinate, and she was kind of bullied and kind of harassed by her manager, because her manager felt that, which of course came out of his insecurity, he felt that she is getting into his territory and she is winning the badges without giving him the kind of, kind of recognition. So, as a non-violent, I mean, again, she never consciously mentioned that she is a non-violent practitioner, or non-violent communication practitioner. But through her activities, it was quite evident that whatever means she demonstrated, it was a non-violent means. So I'll tell you what she did. She has kept herself very grounded, and she started to kind of giving him advice which is relevant for his business to outperform, without taking any credit for for the advice that she has given to her manager, and without entering into his space. So it was like a communication where the manager, suppose a kind of initiative in an organization where a leadership training has to be kind of launched, okay, and leadership trainings are very high level trainings where you require a lot of brainstorming and lot of strategies. So this woman, what she did was, from the backstage, she started to support her manager, she started to empower her manager by telling him that what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, and when it has to be done, without coming to the forefront or without taking the label of success of that event. And thankfully, that event was a great success for the organization. And the women from the backstage, she just clapped her hands, kind of empowered her manager, saying that, boss, you have done a wonderful job, and I just supported you from the backstage. So this is a very tiny example, a very micro example of empowering someone when you feel that your perpetrator is threatening you, when you feel that the perpetrator is kind of feeling insecure. I mean, I don't know if I have made sense to what I spoke.
Yeah, bringing it back, that makes sense now, that somebody is basically using a position of superiority and being dominant, but instead of retaliating, you silently empower them, and that's actually a win-win situation, and that can transform the relationship itself. That's a great
Absolutely.
insight. Yeah, totally. um, do you have any practical insights on how we can combat things like bullying and things like some politics that happen behind the scenes, or some subtle signs of workplace violence? Maybe some examples, or just maybe your experience of what has worked and what kind of steps have been taken.
So yes, Ojas, this is as I said that I was co-creating the meaning of how non-violent protest or how non-violent can help to combat these experiences. So this is one experience which I have just talked about, where the victim was succumbed to a power politics. At the same time, it was a kind of gender differences. The victim was female and the perpetrator was male. So the perpetrator felt that the victim is from the weaker sex and therefore she isn't capable of taking all the glories of what she has done. At the same time, I would also like to tell you that it is not always the case where the woman is the victim and the male is the perpetrator. It can also happen
Right.
either ways. It can also happen in a way where the male feels threatened by the women's perpetration. So it can happen both the ways. So coming back to your question, like what are the practical steps? What I have seen mostly works when people are threatened with bullying or any kind of negative behaviors. The first step they take is they consciously step back from the situation. So
Right.
what I call it a zero step approach. And this word I have borrowed from the sports literature, especially in basketball, where the two, the opponent and they just dribble with the ball, and until they come to a situation, they just go on dribbling because they don't know who would take it over. So this is the word or the phrase that I have borrowed from the sports literature, and I call it taking a zero step approach, where you do not give in to the situation, you do not give in to the opponent. What you do is you consciously step back from the situation. Okay, you take a momentarily pause or a withdrawn without immediately retaliating to your opponent. But I must also tell you, Ojas, that this is not a very easy thing to do. I mean, it
Clearly.
is very, it is very obvious that when you feel that you are threatened, it is very obvious that you take immediate action, you to protect yourself, and you work from your amygdala part of your brain. You either fight, you flight, or you freeze in that situation. But to consciously step back requires a practice, and I call it meditation. You need
Okay.
to be self aware. For that, you need to really connect to your inner self, because once you step back, you have to know what you want to do next, what would be your next plan of action. And that next plan of action would come only when your mind, body, and your spirit is completely in synchronization. So meditation is a wonderful technique where you when you step back, you just meditate, or any mindful exercise or anything that would help you to connect with your inner self, so that next time when you face the situation which you have to face, you face with full awareness, you face with uh, you know from your logical brain with the emotional kind of backup, so that you don't spoil the dignity of the other person, because that is non-violence. So when you respond without reacting to your opponent, you don't spoil the dignity of the other person. You know that the person is a human being, and you keep the dignity upright.
Wow, that's an amazing insight. Thank you so much for sharing that. And
Also, sorry to interrupt you in between,
yeah, no, go
because
ahead.
I am speaking a subject which is very dear to my heart, which is non-violence, and I'm very sorry if I'm interrupting you in between. But your questions are great, Ojas, and that's why I also want to add one point, that non-violence is not an act of cowardice. It's an act of bravery. So when I say momentarily step back, you don't step back to hide yourself, that, okay, I'm not going to face the situation. As a non-violent in mind, you have to face the situation, but you face the situation with complete awareness. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so this has been very insightful for me. I'm sure it's going to be for everybody watching as well. You mentioned a zero-step approach. You mentioned taking a step back, and then you kind of brought in meditation into the picture and kind of linked the two together. And I found that to be very powerful. And usually people talk about meditation as something that you kind of do at the side, that you do, in a moment of peace. But you mentioned it in meditation in the moment. How does one practice meditation in the moment? So there's a moment of confrontation, or there's a high intensity moment. Usually we've come across meditation when you have a lot of time and when you're alone in a silent place, maybe. How do you practice meditation in the moment?
Mhm. Yeah, that's again a very interesting question. So again, this is not something that I invented. I'm a voracious reader of some of the ancient traditions, the teachers who have propagated meditation. And although it's a misconception or a myth that meditation can be done only in the Himalayas, where there is no distraction, where people can just sit, close their eyes, and get into deep introspection. But Gandhiji, who is the proponent of non-violence in the modern era, he himself practiced meditation during turbulent times when he was facing constant threat from the opponents, because of the colonialism, the imperialism structure that we had at that point in time. So meditation is again, it is not a ritual. I don't call meditation as a separate ritual, because if I call meditation as a separate ritual, then it kind of separates us from the meditation aspect. It again becomes another puja or another kind of rituals that we see in our day-to-day lives. Meditation is very much part of our self. It's an exercise of deep introspection, where you can connect with your self, with your inner self, and as in self as in S as in capital. Okay. And you try to see, you try to connect yourself with the higher intelligence, and kind of understand or get the power, like what needs to be done next. So so I
Okay.
think in the turbulent times, meditation helps a lot. And that's the reason I said that when you take a momentarily pause from the situation, you actually deeply introspect. It can be of 10 minutes, 5 minutes, or 30 minutes, or whatever. And then when you come out, you know what needs to be done rationally and logically.
That's wonderful, really is. So pause, take a step back, reflect, connect with your higher self, with with the capital S, self, that you mentioned. Amazing insights. We're coming close to the end of this session. Um, I think this is a wonderful topic that you've touched on, and I would love it if you can share some more resources or some more next steps for the viewers who would like to find out more, who would like to find out how they can implement it in their lives, and especially in the workplace, because I know that workplace violence and finding interventions, resolutions for that is something that is especially very meaningful to you and is the focus of your research as well. I know that it's called nonviolent response methods, and I think it really starts to make sense when you speak of all of these things. So just to bring it to a close, what would you suggest to somebody who wants to bring this into their lives, into their work? Where can they go next? Where can they find out more?
Yeah. So there are plethora of resources where people can train themselves. The easiest one which is coming to my mind is the nonviolent communication. So the framework was developed by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, and he has, and very explicitly, he has highlighted the OFNR framework, which is observation, feelings, needs, and request. So that would be a very quick kind of a reference to people. But at the same time, one needs to practice it. It won't come like if you read a book about OFNR, about Marshall's NVC, it won't come immediately. One has to practice it very consciously to somehow internalize his philosophy into his minds. That is one thing. Apart from that, I can also share some resources from Mehta Center of Nonviolence, which is a non-profit organization based out in US. Their professor Michael Nagler has also extensively worked in nonviolence practices, which is not only related to one-on-one interpersonal communication, but it also has a wider aspects that touch bases upon the structural violence and the systematic violence that we see in our day-to-day life. And of course, my research, which is non-violence response methods, where today, due to the time constraint, I could discuss only one aspect of the zero step approach. I do have like at least five methods of the zero step approach on which I am still working on, and it is not yet ready. It is not in a publishable state right now, and maybe I'm hoping by next year, when I reach that level, I can publish my work and then I can share that with my audience. Thank you.
Wow, that would be priceless. I think if we were able to gather so many insights from one of the steps, and you have 5 steps, then I'm really looking forward to the insights that come out of that. And I love these practical little things that we can actually take in our lives as well. So you mentioned the nonviolent communication framework, but also not just to read it, but to practice it and to internalize it. And I think that's really important, because books and frameworks can be just lost if we just read it. And then you mentioned about this research, this nonprofit organization. Please do share the details with me. I will put it in the description and everybody can go check it out. And then your research work, I think it's going to be really excited. I'm looking forward to it. Maybe if you'd like to share your details with the viewers, if they can get in touch with you, if they're doing research on this, or if they have any questions, that would be amazing.
Thank you so much, Ojas. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about nonviolence, which is kind of silenced for a very long time.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's been great doing this, and it's been a great learning for me as well. And I hope all of you watching have found this valuable. I really appreciate your time, Ayatakshee. We've done this over 2 sessions in 2 weeks, and I think it's come out so well. I'm really happy with it. I hope you enjoyed watching it as well. And if you did, please consider subscribing to the channel, because I look forward to having many such conversations with different experts. And at some point when Ayatakshee is done with her findings, I would love to bring her on again so she can share it with all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.